So good evening, Mr. Chair. It is 7 o'clock. I believe there is a quorum present. We'll confirm that in roll call, and we can start tonight's meeting.
Thank you very much, City Clerk Peter Fay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our virtual meeting of Brampton's Planning and Development Committee. We will begin with the City Clerk calling the roll call for attendance at today's meeting.
Members of committee, I will call your name. Please indicate your presence at today's meeting. Councillor Santos.
Present.
Councillor Vicente.
I'm here.
Councillor Willens.
Good evening.
Councillor Paleshi.
Present.
Councillor Bowman.
Present.
Councillor Williams.
I'm here.
Councillor Fortini.
Present.
Councillor Singh.
Present.
Councillor Dillon. Councillor Dillon, I don't see is present at the moment. Chair Medeiros is present. You have 9 members present, Mr. Chair. You have quorum.
Thank you very much. Our next is approval of the agenda. Does any member wish to add a business item to tonight's meeting?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
So I just wish to point out the clerk's office did receive some delegations late this afternoon, so it will be identified as 6.3 from Sylvia Menezes-Roberts regarding item 7.6 on tonight's agenda, childcare centers, and also another delegation that will be identified as 6.4, again from Sylvia Menezes-Roberts regarding item 7.7 on tonight's agenda, council appointment for Town and Gown Advisory Committee.
Okay, thank you. So as I see there are no further additions, I do have a motion moved by Councillor Fortini to approve the agenda, that the agenda for the regular Planning and Development Committee meeting of June 21st be approved. Is there anyone opposed? Okay, thank you. Our next item, declaration of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Do any members have declaration of pecuniary interest? I see none, so the clerk will so note for the meeting minutes. Consent motion. I will read the items of consent and relevant items, and members can identify any items to be held for debate. Item 7.4, application to amend the official plan zoning bylaw proposed draft plan of subdivision. In consent. Item 7.5. In consent.
Hold 7.5.
7.5 hold. 7.6 we hold because there's a delegation. Is that correct, City Clerk?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you.
Okay. Item 8.1. Okay, in consent. So I have a motion moved by Councillor Singh to approve the consent motion. Or City Clerk, do you want to read out for everyone?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So item 7.4 is being added to consent, an application to amend the official plan, zoning bylaw, and proposed draft plan of subdivision, Your Home Developments, Ebenezer, Inc., Candivcon East, to permit 78 stacked townhouses at 4316 Ebenezer Road in Ward 8, and also the minutes from the Age-Friendly Brampton Advisory Committee meeting of May 25th, which is item 8.1. Held items are 7.5, application to amend the zoning bylaw, Humphreys Planning Group, to permit a single-story multi-unit warehouse building with associated office at northwest corner of Inspire Boulevard and Dixie Road in Ward 9, and that's held by Councillor Singh, and held for delegation is item 7.6, staff report regarding childcare centers in Brampton.
Thank you very much, and I do have a motion moved by Councillor Singh, and I'll hand it over to you, City Clerk, for the roll call, for the recorded vote, sorry.
All members in favor of the consent motion, please indicate. Councillor Santos.
Yes.
Councillor Vicente.
Yes.
Councillor Willens.
Yes.
Councillor Paleshi.
Yes.
Councillor Bowman.
Yes.
Councillor Williams.
Yes.
Councillor Fortini.
Yes.
Councillor Singh.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Dillon is still not present. Chair Medeiros.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, that motion carries 9-0 unanimously.
Thank you very much, City Clerk. Our next section of tonight's agenda is statutory public meeting items. This is a public meeting of the Planning and Development Committee held in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act of Ontario. The proposals to be heard at this public meeting are the result of applications made under the Planning Act. These are not proposals of the City of Brampton unless they are specifically identified as city-initiated proposals. Tonight, we do not have any city-initiated proposals for a statutory public meeting. The intent of this public meeting is to receive submissions for the public regarding these proposals. Given we may have persons watching this meeting through the city's live stream, we will have staff present at each proposal subject to a statutory public meeting unless committee decides otherwise. After receiving any pre-registered delegations, members of the committee may ask questions for clarification, but will not engage in debate on the proposal at this time. Committee consideration of the proposal will occur at a future meeting when planning staff are bringing forward the final recommendation report on each proposal. The city has also posted to its website, brampton.ca, supporting information and documentation for these development applications for public review and reference. We will not proceed to consider the item on this evening's statutory public meeting agenda. After consideration of these public meeting items, committee will deal with the balance of the agenda items on tonight's agenda. Our first item is 5.1, staff report to amend the official plan zoning bylaw, Glenn Schnarr and Associates, May Ching Developments Limited. And I will hand it over to Carmen Caruso, our Central Area Planner for Planning, Building, and Economic Development. Welcome, Carmen.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. So good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, and everyone attending this virtual public meeting this evening. My name is Carmen Caruso, and I am the planner assigned to process, review, and evaluate this application to amend the official plan, zoning bylaw, and for a draft plan of subdivision. The application was submitted by Glenn Schnarr and Associates on behalf of TFP May Ching Developments Limited. Through this presentation, I will be providing some of the technical background and a brief overview of the policy context associated with this proposal, and also outlining some of the preliminary issues that will need to be addressed as part of this application. Please note that as outlined in the public meeting notice, the Planning and Development Committee will not make a decision on this application this evening. The purpose of this meeting is to provide residents with information with respect to this proposal and seek public feedback. A decision in support of or in opposition to the application will be made at a later date. Next slide. This site is located on the southeast corner of Mayfield Road and Chinguacousy Road, just south of the Brampton-Caledon municipal border. Clockwork Drive divides the site approximately in half. The property is municipally known as 11687 Chinguacousy Road. Next slide, please. This slide indicates the types of land uses in the area. The main land use in the vicinity is made up of residential dwellings consisting of a mix of housing types. To the north of the subject site is the town of Caledon, made up of mainly agricultural and vacant lands. The site is also adjacent to an anticipated public school site immediately to the east, and also in the vicinity is a stormwater management pond and feature to the west of Chinguacousy Road. Next slide, please. The applicant has submitted an application to amend the official plan and zoning bylaw as well as for a draft plan of subdivision. The applicant is proposing to create a total of 261 units, including 30 single detached lots ranging in lot width from 9.15 meters to 11.6 meters. A total of 230 townhouse units made up of 50 street townhouses, 70 dual frontage townhouses, and 110 back-to-back townhouses. Also proposing to preserve and restore a heritage house known as the Robert Hall House, which is to be relocated from its existing location to another portion of the site near the southeast corner of Clockwork Drive and Chinguacousy Road. Applicant is also proposing to create a 1.03 hectare mixed-use medium-density commercial block and create 3 pedestrian walkway blocks and 1 natural heritage system block. Next slide, please. The property is designated residential in the official plan. This designation permits predominantly residential land uses, including a full range of dwelling types ranging from single detached houses to apartment dwellings. Complementary commercial, institutional, and public uses are also permitted. The official plan also identifies the site as neighborhood retail. Land within this designation is intended to serve the local shopping needs of the surrounding community. Any proposal to change the intent of the neighborhood retail policies associated with this site requires a market impact study that demonstrates that there is limited need for neighborhood retail at this location. The applicant has submitted the required study, which is currently being peer reviewed by a third-party consultant hired by the city. Next slide, please. The site is designated neighborhood retail and a listed heritage resource in the Mount Pleasant secondary plan. The bulk plan 51-2 of the secondary plan also includes these designations for this site, as well as a small area that is designated natural heritage system on the southwest corner of the property. Amendment to the secondary plan is required to allow the residential uses and the reduction of the amount of commercial uses proposed on the property. Next slide, please. The site has an agricultural zoning on the property, which permits agricultural uses, a single detached dwelling, and limited institutional and commercial uses. A site-specific zoning bylaw amendment is required to permit this development. The zoning bylaw submitted by the applicant proposes to rezone the lands to permit a range of single detached dwellings and townhouse units, a wide range of commercial and residential uses within the mixed-use medium-density commercial block, and a number of open space and natural heritage areas. A number of development standards are also included in the draft zoning bylaw and will be reviewed as part of the evaluation of this proposal. Next slide, please. At this time, the following preliminary issues have been noted. First, the appropriateness of the location of the northerly walkway block will be reviewed. Second, the city policy documents indicate that this site is expected to be developed for commercial uses. The applicant has proposed commercial uses on the site. However, the appropriateness of reducing the expected amount of commercial space will be further analyzed as part of the evaluation of this proposal. And third, suitable conservation methods for the relocation, restoration, and reuse of the Robert Hall House heritage resource will be finalized as part of this application. These issues and others that are raised will be addressed in a future recommendation report. Next slide, please. The application will be evaluated against existing provincial and municipal policies, including those found in the Planning Act, also in the provincial policy statement, the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, the Region of Peel official plan, and the City of Brampton official plan, and as well as the Mount Pleasant secondary plan. Next slide, please. This slide indicates the steps that have occurred with respect to the review of this application and the future steps of the evaluation process. A notice of complete application was sent to the applicant on May 10th, 2021, and published in the Brampton Guardian. The application was circulated to cities and external agencies for comment. The notice of tonight's statutory public meeting under the Planning Act was sent out on June 1st, 2021, and today we are at the public meeting part of this application. For the next steps, staff will continue to assess the application by analyzing and evaluating comments and issues that are raised at tonight's meeting by residents that make representation before the committee, as well as analyzing and evaluating comments that were received from submitted correspondence from residents, city departments, and external agencies. Once a comprehensive review has been completed, staff will prepare a recommendation report for consideration by council. As noted, any issues raised through the review of the application, including any issues raised this evening, will be addressed in the recommendation report. Anyone who has provided their contact information at tonight's meeting or through correspondence relating to this file will be notified before the recommendation report is considered by council. Any decision the council makes in support of or in opposition to the proposal can be appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal. Next slide, please. The information and correspondence associated with tonight's meeting is available online at www.brampton.ca on the City Hall Meetings and Agendas webpage. This presentation will also be available online shortly. Again, my name is Carmen Caruso. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me or the applicant. The contact information is shown on this slide. This concludes my presentation, and thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. City Clerk, do we have any delegations?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, we have 6 registered delegations and 23 pieces of correspondence identified under 11.1. We also have present representatives from the applicant, should there be any questions for clarification from staff. So the first delegation is from Salil Bouchard and Nikita Walia, and I'm just going to unmute their mics. And Salil and Nikita, you can address the committee on this matter.
Hi, good afternoon. Good evening, respected delegates of the city, public members, and others. Thank you for giving us the opportunity today to voice out our concerns on this land platform. It certainly feels that our persistent voting in the past years is finally coming to fruition because we're righteously being heard. Myself, Nikita Walia, and my husband, Salil Bachar, along with many other homeowners of the Mount Pleasant North Phase 9, are very much concerned with the proposed amendment, and we strongly oppose it and criticize it for replacing the commercial retail properties to the proposed residential properties. When weighing the overall pros and cons, the pros of having a commercial property nearby are much more, keeping in mind the public interest, economic, and sociocultural factors. We invested in this community because we were promised a mixed-use development. The planning officers of this city must consider that a balance of both residential and commercial properties will lead to a more sustainable community. Although myriad of factors can affect housing prices, it is commonly held assumption that the presence of commercial property or the promise of future commercial development can significantly impact the value of nearby homes positively. Particularly in a city with a high population density such as Brampton, the presence of shops, restaurants, and other commercial establishments could provide a boost in the property value for the current residences, particularly if the commercial property caters to an affluent demographic. In addition to all of the above, we also need to consider that the nearest retail stores and plazas are far too away. Having a nearby commercial plaza will have a positive impact on the local environment as well. It will be more environmentally and economically friendly because some residents may even opt to walk rather than making those automobile trips and burning the extra gas. Yes, the new proposed plan caters to a promise of almost 261 future houses, but we cannot allow that to provide for that with the opportunity cost of diminishing resources and value of us, the current residences. We do not need a concentrated and densely populated residential area. What we need is to attain the perfect balance by having a mixed-use developed and planned community. Having a very densely populated residential area will mean that all the residents, current and future proposed, will be driving far away to the existing commercial amenities. That way, not only we will face higher traffic in residential areas, but also in the existing commercial areas, which will then need to cater to the proposed residential areas as well. Look at the cities of Halton region, for example. They're flourishing because they're adopting the mixed-use community planning and development. We would strongly urge the respective members of the city to consider and support the voice of the public residents, support the public, economic, and environmental interests. Those are our submissions. Thank you once again for your time, everyone. That's Nikita and Salil Bachar.
Thank you. Our next registered delegate is Yazpal Jora. Yazpal does not seem to be in the session, although I do see somebody who's called in by telephone. So, Mr. Chair, just bear with me a moment. I'm just going to identify the call-in user. The person that's just called in a few minutes ago, I'm going to unmute your mic if you can please identify yourself. Hi, can you please identify yourself? The person that's called in by telephone just a moment ago?
Hi, it's Gloria Shan.
Sorry, can you say your name one more time, please?
Gloria Shan.
Okay, Gloria, thank you. I'm just going to put you on hold. We'll get to your item in a moment.
Okay, thanks.
So, Mr. Chair, Yazpal Jara does not seem to be present in tonight's meeting. The next registered speaker is Faisal Salik. And again, I do not see Faisal Salik in tonight's session. So the next registered delegate is Harpreet Sidhu. Harpreet has joined the meeting, and Harpreet has now left the meeting. So Harpreet was having connection issues, so I'm going to suggest we go on to the next delegate, and we'll come back to Harpreet. The next registered delegate was Nawab Singh Dhaliwal, who does not appear to be present for this particular item. And finally, the next registered delegate is Anjan Rakshit. Anjan, we're just going to bring you into the meeting now, and I'm going to, just bear with us a moment. There is a presentation from Anjan, and Charlotte, I'm going to give you presenter so you can bring up that presentation. Anjan, you should be able to unmute your microphone now. Anjan, you can please unmute your microphone to address the committee.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
This is Anjan Rakshit. I'm a homeowner in the Mount Pleasant North Phase 9, and this presentation which I'm making is on behalf of the homeowners of Mount Pleasant North Phase 9. Next slide, please. First of all, in this slide, we are showing in brief why we are making this submission. Mount Pleasant North homeowners, Phase 9 homeowners group strongly oppose any amendment which will change the commercial property zone in the northwest corner of Mount Pleasant North community. This submission is intended to convey serious concerns of the existing homeowners in respect of this amendment, which will cause imbalance in the current plan. Next slide, please. Our first concern is that currently we have lack of easy access to large commercial retail complex as well as the daily necessities. Homeowners' investment of our hard-earned savings to purchase homes in this community was influenced by Mount Pleasant North Phase 9 plan, which was attached, which I am showing here in this slide. This was attached with our legal agreement with Matami Homes. Mind that this was legal agreement with Matami Homes, where two large pieces of land in the northwest corner of Mount Pleasant North were shown as proposed future commercial block. Next slide, please. Here we are showing the examples of the lack of easy access to large retail complex and daily necessities. Let's talk first about the retail complexes. I'm giving here a few large retail complexes which we are looking forward, at least one or two of them if they come here, our hardship to they faced in traveling to long distances, doing our retail shopping work will be avoided. The Walmart, our nearest Walmart here is Buved and Hurantorio, which is 7 kilometers from this area. Nearest Home Depot, which is at the intersection of 410 and Buved, was 13 kilometers from this area. Nearest Costco is 410 and Steeles. It is 19 kilometers from this area. Just imagine how much travel it would require for going for shopping in this. And for many seniors like me, who are resident of this location, we find it very difficult to travel such long distances for our retail shopping. Now let's talk about the daily necessities. There are overcrowded street plazas which are minimum 3 kilometers away. They have grocery stores, medical, dental clinics, pharmacies, restaurants, gas stations, but none of these daily necessities, grocery stores, medical, dental clinics, pharmacies, restaurants, and gas stations are in Mount Pleasant North community. Just imagine that if you are going to the nearest crowded plaza, which is at the corner of Wanless and Chinguzi, at times, particularly during the lunch time as well as the evening peak hours, I find very difficult to park my cars. Had I not got the handicap permit, I would not have been able to park there at all. So what happens to the average residents who don't have the handicap permit? This gas station, for filling up the gas in my car, we have to go all the way to Hurantorio and Mayfield. So just imagine we are spending $5 worth of gas for filling up the gas in our car. Is it worth it? Next slide, please. Our second concern is the financial loss. This amendment denies the existing homeowners possibility of easy access to large retail complexes and daily necessities, resulting in significant financial loss due to lesser appreciation of home values. As you know, the home values always goes up when the community is a full-fledged community which has got balance of residential as well as the commercial complexes. But this particular amendment will take away any possibility of having the commercial retail complexes in this area. This will impact not only the current generation as well as future generations. Once these changes are done, once this amendment is done, it dashes out all our hopes of having the retail complexes. It will create an imbalance in the plan because of the proposed amendment. Next slide, please. In conclusion, what we want to say is the concerns expressed in this submission are not only applicable for Mount Pleasant North Phase 9 homeowners, but also applicable to the entire Mount Pleasant North and adjoining communities. Therefore, it is our humble submission to the City of Brampton to address these concerns and not to approve the proposed amendment, which will cause imbalance in the current plan. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair, I'm still looking through the attendee list, and we do not see Yazpal Jara, Faisal Salik, and Harpreet Sidhu was present, but is no longer present in the session. And Nawab Singh Dhaliwal is not present as well. So that is the end of the registered delegates for this evening's statutory public meeting.
Okay, thank you very much, City Clerk. I do have a question. Reminder for members of committee, feel free to, on the chat box, express your interest in asking any questions of clarification. I do have Councillor Palashi. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question of clarification for Carmen. Carmen, can you explain where you had indicated in your slides in the official plan the designation of the land was residential, and then on the very next slide you had indicated the land's designation was retail. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more, please?
Sure, thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Palashi. Yeah, so what the general designation in the official plan is residential, and that does permit some complementary commercial uses. And there's also another section of the official plan that speaks to retail establishments and components in the official plan. So there's actually two designations on this. One is residential, which does allow commercial type uses, and then it narrows it, or it gets more specific with the neighborhood retail designation in another portion of the official plan. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
No, for sure it does.
Okay.
Do the designations have dates on them of when they were designated? Each one being residential, one being retail.
Through you, Mr. Chair, not likely. That would take some research, but we could probably get that answer for you when it was designated.
That would be perfect if that could come back in the report.
Sure, perfect.
And then my follow-up question was that the retail justification was being peer reviewed. Who is the peer reviewing the justification, and who pays for the peer review?
So through you, Mr. Chair, so the city hires the peer reviewer, but the applicant pays for them.
And
so they'll pay for the peer review.
So essentially, though, they're working on behalf of the city.
That's correct.
And then do they communicate with the applicant for any questions that they have on the justification report, or is the justification report the only thing they have to work from?
So through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Palashi. So what happens is that the peer reviewer will submit their findings to city staff. City staff will review the findings and then inform the applicant of any findings.
Thank you, Carmen. Those are my questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As I see there's no further questions, I do have a motion moved by Councillor Palashi to approve the staff report recommendations and applicant delegation, that the report titled application to amend the official plan and zoning bylaw and for a draft of subdivision Glenshire and Associates, TFP Maching Developments Limited, 11687 Chinguacousy Road, to the Planning Development Committee meeting of June 7, 2021 be received, and that the Development Services staff be directed to report back to the Planning Development Committee with the results of the public meeting and the staff recommendation subsequent to the completion of the circulation of the application, a comprehensive evaluation of the proposal, and that delegations 6.2 and correspondence 11.1 be received. Is there anyone opposed to this motion? Okay, thank you. So this item is now adjourned. We now go to public delegations, and our first delegation is item 6.1. And I'll hand it over to you, City Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So delegations tonight, we have two of them. This is Delegation 6.1 regarding item 7.3 on this evening's agenda, an application to amend the official plan and zoning bylaw, Great Gulf Homes, Scottish Heather Developments, and Brampton G&H Holdings. And our first delegation is from Gloria Sean. Gloria, I'm just going to unmute your mic. You're now unmuted, and you have up to 5 minutes to address the committee. Please go ahead. You may proceed, Gloria. Gloria, you may address.
Can you hear me?
Yes, if you can just turn down the speaker on your device.
Hello? Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. There's a bit of feedback, so you just may want to turn down the speaker on your device just a little bit. So go ahead, Gloria. And if you have the live stream on in the background, that's what you may want to turn down, because that's the feedback that seems to be generating. So, Mr. Chair, it looks like Gloria has exited the session. Hopefully she will rejoin. In the meantime, we have a second delegation from Jiwanjat Sandhu, who is in the session. And Jiwanjat, you may unmute your mic now to address committee on this item. So Jiwanjat, you can unmute your mic and you can address the committee. So Jiwanjat, I'm going to go ahead and unmute your mic.
Yep. Hi
Please,
there.
please go ahead. You can address the committee on this item.
Hi there.
Please go ahead.
Okay. So actually, just want to advise you, I do have Gloria here beside me. We are together as delegates,
Hi.
and we want to start the video as well, if possible.
Just a minute, just talk at least. Yeah.
Yeah. Hello?
So
Can
please
you hear us?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to start with, that I received the response from the City Development Committee's office, especially from Rob. So we are really thankful and grateful for that as well. And also we want to thank you guys that the building of the, the apartment buildings have been removed from the builder's proposal. That's correct, right? Hello?
Through you, Mr. Chair, Alan Parsons here, Director of Development Services. Just want to confirm that, yes, the delegation's statement there is correct. There is an apartment building that was previously proposed, which is now removed from the application.
Okay. Now, as per the response in the email, it is confirmed that there's commercial land which is kept aside for the future, like according to the amendment plan. And what is the guarantee that the builder will not come back to amend that plan? That's one of our questions as well. And we as residents in this area, which is like around 250 families or more, which are being affected by the amendments that happen in the area. Because when we first bought our houses here with our hard-earned monies, and we did the investment here, the original plan was for the executive homes to be in this area. And as we all know, so the executive homes have better usage of the land per families here. And our concern is as residents that we don't want this area to be congested, and there's hardly any infrastructure in place for the families to use. For example, there's no community center here, there's no library. Yes, we see some of the retail. We don't see the hospital. Like the closest one we have here is the Credit Valley Hospital, which is quite far from here. And then there's no swimming pool, park play area. There are smaller parks here, but we don't see any like soccer fields or any parks where the teenagers, they can go and exercise and stuff. So having been a resident here in first Heartland area in Mississauga and then Halton region, I've seen communities develop. I have seen Great Gulf Homes, built really prestigious communities, in Oakville and in Halton region as well, and Vaughan. So we want to make sure that, that we made a move here from Halton region, thinking that this is a prestigious location and, great community is coming up here. So as residents of this area, we feel kind of cheated if the builder does not stick to his original plan, which was a few years ago. So our request here is that please keep in mind the traffic and the congestion on the road. And we are in like a beautiful corner of Brampton here, that we want safety of our children and families at the forefront, and that, there should not be no further amendments to his plan, and that they stick to the plan. And I'm going to let now Gloria speak on certain concerns here as well. And we do thank you for the time today for the meeting.
Yeah, thank you, Jeevan. So yeah, on behalf of our community, I also represent almost 450 to 500 families here dwelling in both Great Gulf and Kenneth homes. So obviously, to add to Jeevan Jyoth's concern, we still feel that the reportings that were submitted is not accessible to us. We can see what exactly the city has approved. We don't see exactly what the builder has done. All we know is the initial plan was amended, and we all feel that it's been a concern for us, because our home prices are definitely going to be having impact when there is a huge traffic of residence units added. And plus, as Jeevan was saying, there is safety issues, and also we have been notified that recently there was 240 meters, like people dwelling close, like away, close to 240 meters will be impacted. I don't get that point at all. So what's going to happen to people dwelling out of 450 meters? That means they will not have any impact. That's something which is not sitting well with us. And on top of that, 669 homes have been approved. We had initiated this concern last winter, and despite our concern, I'm not sure how city approved the additional 440 homes or whatever. So definitely our concerns were not heard. Although we had a meeting in October, November of last year, we were quite confident that the builder and the city would be collaboratively doing some good for us, but instead we haven't seen anything in positive trends. So it's out of concern and disturbance that we are, positioning our case. So that's my point on behalf of the entire community, who's almost 450 to 500 dwellings. Thank you.
Thank you. So there are no further delegations, City Clerk?
There are not, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. And so members of committee, I will suggest that we bring item 7.3, which is the application, the accompanying staff report. But before I will ask a motion to be moved to receive the delegation. And I will ask if you can just remind me, Ward 6. So I would suggest Councillor Willens, a motion to receive the delegation from Gloria Shan, Brampton resident, and G1 Jot Sandu, Brampton resident, to the Planning Development Committee meeting of June 21st regarding item 7.3, an application to amend the official plan zoning bylaw, Great Gulf Homes, Scottish Heather Developments, and Brampton G&H Holdings be received. Is there anyone opposed to this motion? No? Okay, so committee, we will now have item 7.3, staff report regarding application to amend the official zoning bylaw, Great Gulf Homes, Scottish Heather Developments Incorporated. Do any members have questions about the staff report? I see Councillor Paleshi. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, I think from a resident, you know, when Gloria and they put some good comments forward, they feel like there was a number of delegations when this came to public meeting. We had a town hall afterwards. We've had we've had a fair amount of emails. I guess what some of the concerns are that the delegations are saying that they don't feel like they were heard, to the effect that nothing has really changed from the original plan. Maybe what staff could do is to go through maybe some of the concerns that residents in the area had raised in the public meeting, and I know staff was on the town hall, virtual town hall meeting, and maybe it can advise some of the residents of how the plan did change with some of their questions and concerns.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, it's Rob Nicky Fortune, development planner with the city, who prepared the staff report, recommendation report. I would have to say that there has been some change, maybe a significant amount of change has taken place from the original submission from June to the public meeting in December. And after all the feedback came back from the residents, the applicant initially wanted to increase the low-medium density from 448 to 669, which still remains the same, but they also wanted to add 420 apartment units within 4 buildings of 6 stories in height. I believe that most of the concern did come from the medium-high density that was being proposed, and the applicant heard this and agreed, not through discussions with staff, but on their own, to remove the high-density block that was being proposed, which took out 420 units. Even without removing those units, all the traffic studies, all the technical studies submitted in support indicated that the additional density in dwellings could be supported. It is, and one of the questions just raised by one of the residents is that, is there any guarantees that no future application would be submitted in the future? And no, we can't guarantee that, because the original application was originally filed for the subdivision back in 2006, based on the old city policies and the old provincial guidelines and land use statutes, and was developed in accordance with that. Now in 2020, when they filed the revised application, it's based on new city policies and also based on the new provincial guidelines and land use statutes. So anyways, there has been a movement afoot to make changes. The applicant is only proceeding in accordance with the current government policies of the date. And there were concerns raised about the fact that the community center was not in place, and it's been a while, and not something I could really get into. After doing my research back in November of last year, it was estimated that in 2025 would be the timing for the community center and park to get up and running. And there's also ongoing discussions with the abutting school board, appeal board to the west, which maybe they could share some of their facilities and uses. And that was ongoing to see if they can maximize their opportunities. So this is something that's being worked on outside of this application, and but that information was forwarded on to community services, so they are aware of the concerns. And as for the hospitals and the other adjacent infrastructure, we do have Mississauga Road, which is a transit supportive road. We'll have better public transit in the future. This is a great location for higher density, given the higher employment opportunities to the south, along Steeles, south of Steeles. And so there are a lot of good reasons from planning purposes why there should be a density increase. And the fact that executive housing really isn't that appropriate in this location because you don't have significant environmental attributes like other executive housing has, like Professor's Lake and other places. So this is an area where you cannot get direct access into the environmental features. And from a planning point of view, the proposed application seems to be appropriate. And for that reason, it hasn't changed too much in the other aspects.
Yeah, I think that you'll have some residents that will disagree with you on some of those fronts, but from my recollection, the lands that have been removed from the applicant were the huge part of the concern in the public meeting, and also with respect to the to the town hall. And if you can, I know you might not be able to, Rob, but I don't know if we have anybody from community services that can come on to talk about the advancements of the community center that's coming, if possible. So, Mr. Chair, if you could put a call out to community services, if there's anybody from staff on with respect to community services that can talk about the community center.
Okay, I think they would staff, City Clerk, would you know if staff's available from community services?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't see anyone at the moment from community services on tonight's session.
Okay, so from my understanding, in the last budget, Councillor Willens and I put forward a proposal to advance the design to try and move it so far 1 year earlier, if that was possible. I from my understanding in last conversations that I've had with community services, they were looking into that to see if they could do that and ultimately deliver on the rec center a year in advance of everything. We really like to see this rec center be built as soon as possible. This is already becoming a very congested area without the amenities. So I know that Councillor Willens and I will certainly continue to advocate and push for this. And I also know yourself, Mr. Chair, and Councillor Bowman, just on the stone throw away on the other side of Mississauga Road, have talked about trying to get this community center advanced a little bit. So I know that all four of us will continue to try and advocate for that. So thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you, Councillor Palashi. Would you like to add anything, Rob?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry. I just looking at my notes when the residents were speaking, they did make one last reference to how residents within 240 meters would be impacted. And I think that's largely related to the fact that when we give notice to the public, it's within 240 meters notice of the property limits involved. And that's really what the 240 meters makes reference to. That's really regarding the statutory obligations that we have to give notice. And even then we go beyond that. So that's what that pertains to.
Thank you very much, Rob. So members of committee, I do have a motion here. Councillor Palashi, at this time, are you feeling comfortable to move this motion? Okay. Do we have anyone, any councillor, Councillor Willens, or any councillor would like to move this motion?
I'll move it.
So moved by Councillor Willens, that the report titled Recommendation Report Application to Amend the Official Plan Zoning Bylaw, Great Gulf Homes, Scottish Heather Developments Incorporated, Brampton GH Holdings Incorporated, Brampton GH Holdings 2 Incorporated, West Side Mississauga Road, between Embleton Road and Lionhead Golf Club Road, dated June 7th to the Planning Development Committee meeting of June 21st be received, that the application to amend the official plan and zoning bylaw submitted by Great Gulf Homes Scottish Heather Developments, Brampton G&H Holdings, Brampton G&H Holdings Incorporated, Ward 6 as revised, be approved on the basis that represents good planning, including that it's consistent with the provincial policy statement, conforms to the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, the Region Appeal Official Plan, and the city's official plan for the reasons set out in this report. That the amendments to the official plan, including the Brampton West Secondary Plan, generally in accordance with the bylaw attached as Appendix 12 of this report, be adopted. That the amendments to the zoning bylaw, generally in accordance with the bylaw attached as Appendix 13 of this report, be adopted. That staff be directed to work with the applicant to ensure the amendments are made to the purchase and sale agreement and the detailed community information maps to illustrate the revised housing and lotting changes, and that no further notice or public meeting be required for the attached zoning bylaw amendment pursuant to Section 3417 of the Planning Act as amended. Is there anyone opposed to this motion? There are no objections, so the motion carries. We now go on to our item 6.2. Oh no, we dealt with 6.2 already. This was considered a public meeting. Now we go to staff presentations.
Mr. Chair?
And yes.
We had added delegation 6.3 from Sylvia Menezes-Roberts regarding
My
item
apologies.
7.6.
That's correct.
And then following that
Okay.
will be 6.4. So Sylvia, we're just going to bring you into the meeting right now. And this, Sylvia, you can unmute your mic. And this is in regard to staff report item 7.6 on tonight's agenda, child care centers in Brampton. You can proceed, Sylvia.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello, my name is Sylvia Roberts. I originally brought forward the deputation that this is in regards to. I brought up specific concerns about how the city has a shortage of childcare spots and that the zoning is obstructing it. And this report shows exactly that relative to Mississauga, we do have significantly less spots, and also that zoning in the vast majority of the city bans it. It's the staff makes the argument that while we have less people in Mississauga, so the fact we have less childcare spots makes sense, and that would make sense if the spot shortage was proportional. However, Brampton now has 90% of the population of Mississauga, but it only has 70% of the childcare spots. That's not proportional at all to the lower population. The report conflates a whole bunch of different things. The report makes no difference between childcare for a 2-year-old and childcare for a 12-year-old. They're both considered childcare spots. However, they're functionally massively different because a 12-year-old can be left home alone. A 2-year-old cannot. Also, the 12-year-old has school for the vast majority of the day, and then there's after-school activities, whereas a 2-year-old, that's in that really fun time for parents between when your parental leave has ended and they're not in school. So you actually do need something for someone to take care of the child, because you don't really have time. You have to take time off from work or be a stay-at-home parent, which can cause all sorts of adverse impacts on your career, and this report doesn't seem to consider that at all. The city doesn't seem to think about the fact that there exists a middle between someone taking care of 5 children and an institutional use of 200 children. It's entirely reasonable to have a child care in the range of like maybe 30 children or less in a residential area, provided it's on something like a collector. But staff didn't bother to bring forward any real suggestions on how do we address this. Staff talks about, well, mixed-use developments in the future, but the thing is, Brampton's already hit 2/3 of its population that we're planning for. So what happens to all those people? I live in Peel Village, and right now it's full of seniors. However, in 10 years, most of them are going to be retirement homes or dead. And then you're going to have young families with kids probably moving in there, and there's no childcare spots. So are we expecting these? So we talk about mixed-use development and 15-minute communities, but the reality is Brampton has so little childcare spots that if you don't actively plan for making sure we proactively get childcare, people are going to own cars so they can drive 5 or 10 kilometers to drop their kids off the childcare and then commute back to near where they were because we didn't bother to plan for it. I recognize staff has come forward with, yes, and validated all of my concerns about childcare, about how there's not enough and the zoning actively obstructs it, but there really should be some consideration of, maybe we should fix this. So it talks about the zoning bylaw review, but where is this? The last mention to it on the city website is for the zoning bylaw review. I think it's February 2020. It's been a little bit since then. Where is it? How is progress going? Perhaps childcare in a city where the vast majority of households contain children should be a consideration. Thank you. That's my delegation.
Thank you. I do have a question from member of committee, Councillor Williams. And just a reminder, question of clarification to the delegation. Thank you. Not clarification, but it has to be in the form of a question.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Chair. Sylvia, thanks so much for coming in and giving us your insight and your interpretation of the report that staff have written. I share some of your concerns as well. I just wanted to get the comfort or hear your thoughts on what you thought about that section of the report that really spoke to the inability to determine how many unlicensed childcare centers there are. And I wonder if that, once you really look at that as one of the gaps, or if you look at that as maybe one of the solutions to the gap that's been created because of our bylaw, if we had that data, would you still have the same concerns that you're addressing about the lack of childcare centers?
In Brampton, I know a lot of people who are sponsoring their grandparents primarily for the fact that, yes, they would like their grandparents, but also they can't get childcare. So in some ways, it's easier to sponsor their grandparents bring their parents over so that the parents can provide childcare for their kids. This is really messed up. There is a serious shortage of childcare. There is no real way to get data on unlicensed childcare. Just because of the nature of it, it's not underground. It's not an underground economy, but it's also there's no real ways it properly interacts with any of the systems, and that in a way that even if they're legally compliant, that by trying to actually track them down could actually reduce the number of spots. If you really want better data, you have to allow something in the middle between 5 kids basically running a babysitting service, because let's face it, there's plenty of families in Brampton that do have 5 kids, and something that is a full-blown institutional, like, mini school. Like, if you look at our schools, is a school with 12 portables the right place for it? There is no way to actually get this data.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, I don't know if that answered your question.
Well, I think this is the thing. We don't have this data, and that is one of the areas I think we should be looking to the places that are able to help us collect that data, and so I want to encourage you to bring this delegation to the region, because I know that they would be one of the areas that could help fill some of the gaps that you speak about and that we're experiencing here at the city through the regional childcare centers as a possibility. A question to the chair: is it possible to bring forward the report now just to deal with it?
We will be dealing with it. So if you have no further questions, I will be dealing with it.
Okay, great. I have no further questions. Thank you so much, Sylvia, for coming in. I do have questions to staff, though.
Thank you. I do have a motion moved by Councillor Williams to receive the delegation by Sylvia Roberts regarding childcare centers in Brampton be received. Is there anyone opposed? I see none. So at this time, I will bring forward the staff report regarding childcare centers in Brampton. Do members of committee have any questions or comments regarding the staff report 7.6? Councillor Williams, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. So thanks so much. I did read through the report. It's actually quite interesting. And like I was talking with the delegate, the piece around not knowing how many unlicensed childcare centers is a major gap. And so when you look to collecting that data, can you speak to how and like how we would be able to collect that and what steps are being taken in order to understand how many childcare centers that we have that aren't licensed? Also, and if you could speak to whether or not those areas that you mentioned that in the report, it had about 210 locations, and there are some areas that are underserved. Are those areas that are underserved, could they potentially be served by unlicensed childcare centers as well? So I'm wondering, and if you can even highlight some of those areas, that would be really great. It's a lot of questions in one. There you go.
All right. So through the chair, I'll ask Andrew here, who is both the author of the report and also overseeing the comprehensive zoning bylaw review, to respond. But thank you, Councillor, and through the chair, Andrew, if you could provide some guidance on those questions.
Absolutely, yeah. Thanks, Bob, and through the chair to Councillor Williams. Excellent questions and a truly very important issue for the city of Brampton. Just to step back for a moment, when we looked at all the data that was available, yes, Brampton is lagging behind some of our neighbors. We're ahead of cities like Hamilton and Ottawa. But the thing that I was interested in is when you look at the largest provider of childcare spaces within Peel Region, it's publicly funded schools. And when you do the math on that, our enrollment in each center is virtually identical to the city of Mississauga. We're still growing. We're going to be building more schools. So I would anticipate that delta will narrow as Brampton continues to build out. But the most interesting stat that stood out to me was that licensed home care is truly a preferred choice within the city of Brampton. Of all of the licensed home care facilities in Peel, there are 619. 61% of them are in the city of Brampton. What this indicates to me, or I think indicates to me, is that home-based solutions are a preferred model in the city. The gap, which you've identified, is that we have no way of tracking unlicensed home care. I can speak from experience. I have twins. I had my twins in unlicensed home care in the city of Mississauga. So the multi-generational makeup of a lot of our households in Brampton, I think we can start to connect some dots and see that this is a preferred model. It's affordable. A lot of people feel it actually delivers a higher quality of childcare. The challenge is that the ministry, the province, tried to undertake developing a registry of unlicensed childcare. And I think they realized the momentous task it would be. A lot of folks, quite frankly, might not be willing to share that data for whatever reason. So I think we all collectively agree having that data is critical, but how to get it is a completely another issue that may prove incredibly challenging. But again, back to the numbers that we're looking at for the preference for licensed home care, that would tend to indicate to me that's probably providing some of the solution there. So I understand why Sylvia has raised this issue. The challenge is the data isn't there to fully answer the question, but indicators are that it may not be as bad a situation as we think. Through the zoning bylaw review, which we will be following up on in the fall and into 2022, we can start to look at creative solutions to enable different types of childcare, whether it's through nodes, transit corridors, etc. So we'll be looking to loosen up some of the restrictions and make it easier to do. But that gap that you've raised, Councillor Williams, is one that's very difficult to find the data for. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. It does answer. You know, the other side of it, though, Andrew, that I think is so great is that there are 379 licensed home child care centers, which is really encouraging. And I know when I worked in at Rock, one of the we there was a time where they were going through the change in the whole act, the whole Child Care Act, and we had to encourage people to get licensed if they were a home care because um, you know, that reduction in how many kids you can take, having only 5 kids, you can't have any more kids on top of that, really made it difficult for a lot of child care centers to run. But it also made it safer, which is why they had to make those changes. um, but that it may, and I'm looking at that as a possible solution, in because the more unlicensed child care centers that become licensed, it helps kind of track that data, which would be helpful. So I think that's encouraging, and I hope that with the act, the Child Day Nurseries Act, that they are able to encourage more people to see that as a possibility. Being a parent myself, childcare is such a very intimate conversation for parents to have. They need to, it's a personal conversation, and making that decision of where you want to put your child to be cared for. And yeah, some people make the choice that a home child care center is better for them rather than a larger center. But it's such a very like I call it intimate because you have to make that decision for yourself as a parent. And so the options, I think, is so important. A last question is, I noticed in one of the pages that section 4-9-11-1 is at that area around the schools. And have we had any new daycares open because of the schools approving it, or or has that even been a barrier to daycares being able to open? Have schools been willing to see one open in their location? And if they have, how many do we have opening in Brampton in the next few years?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would have to circle back and find out the answer to that. I honestly, I don't know at this point, but we could certainly find that out.
Okay, that would be helpful. I just think it's something for parents to look forward to as new neighborhoods open up, and that means that new schools are opening up. Then there is an opportunity for childcare in those areas. But overall, I think you know, working with the province and the region to try and collect that data around unlicensed childcare would be very helpful. And then that way we can know whether or not there are gaps and which areas are underserved as you are doing the bylaw review. Because childcare is an important aspect of a family's development here in Brampton. But overall, thank you so much for the report. It's appreciated. And if you could circle back, that'd be great. Thanks. No further questions, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Williams. Councillor Fortini.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. I know that childcare has been always very hard and it's becoming more expensive every day. And, you know, it's regulated by the ministry, how much window space, how much kids you're allowed. But I know there's Rise and Shine, there's Peekaboo, there's a lot of empty spaces. But under our bylaw, I know a lot of people, like, you know, they'd rather go into a private in their homes. It's a lot cheaper than having them to these daycares because today's the way how expensive it is. How many kids are we allowed to have in a home now today? Without them, you don't have to be licensed.
Through you, Mr. Chair.
3 or 5?
It's 5 actually. 5. So 5 or less is considered babysitting according to the city's bylaw. Yeah. And you're absolutely right. The dollar difference between a licensed facility and a home-based care, again, I can speak from experience, it's more than 50% cheaper, a home-based option. So for a lot of folks, going into a licensed facility is just out of reach. So that's why we have the popularity of home-based options.
Yeah, and I agree with you. You know, as a well experienced in childcare, trust me, with 4 daycares. But you know, the ministry comes in every month. They want you to change toys. You need so much light, and you need so much window space. It depends the age. It becomes so hard that you have to charge a lot of money. So a lot of people going into these private. So it's very hard to get data when you have 5 people, is considered babysitting. Really, they're actually a childcare. I know there's a house across the street from me that they watch 3 kids, so they don't have to be licensed. So, but I know if you go into these Peekaboo and the Rising Shack, there's a lot of empty spaces. And the reason it's empty is because people can't really afford to pay $750 a month for a child these days. So it's becoming very expensive. Anyway, thank you. So I thought it was, they dropped it down to 3, but still at 5 like it was in the past. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Fortini. So I do have a staff report regarding childcare centers in Brampton, moved by Councillor Williams, that the staff report regarding childcare centers in Brampton to the Planning and Development Committee meeting of June 21st be received and be removed from the referred matters list. Is there anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries. I'll go now to City Clerk for our next delegation regarding item 7.6. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair. The next delegation is from Sylvia Menezes-Roberts, Delegation 6.4, and this is in regard to item 7.7 on tonight's agenda, the staff report titled Council Appointment for Town and Gown Advisory Committee. Sylvia, you can please address the committee.
Hello. This report somewhat mystifies me in that even though agendas for planning meetings normally go up 2 Fridays before, this was only added last Friday, and yet this also doesn't really touch upon Humber Guelph, which I could see why, because it was a closed matter, why it wouldn't come forward. There's a number of choices in this that are somewhat bizarre. One of them is that Humber/Humber Guelph and York University are not on it. Brampton Transit connects to both of them, and if you ask Brampton Transit what % of their customers get off at York University, it's significant because of COVID and the fact York U isn't an operation in in-person classes. The Queen Street bus went from the busiest bus route in the whole metro area outside of Toronto to substantially cut back because there just wasn't all that much ridership, because so much of it is driven by York U. York U by itself probably has 3, 4, maybe 10 times as many students who live in Brampton as go to Algoma and Ryerson combined. So the exclusion of it is actually extremely bizarre. It's those students live in Brampton and they take Brampton Transit, they use the facilities, so why on earth wouldn't they be on the committee? Same thing with Humber College. Humber College is just outside of Brampton city limits. It's 2 kilometers from it. It's not technically in Brampton, but it's so close to Brampton that there's not much of a difference. It's like how York University is technically in Toronto, but because it's south of Steeles. But imagine if York Region is like, yeah, well, York University is in Toronto, so we're not going to bother to do anything, any kind of planning consideration or whatsoever with York University. I know you can't make them, but it doesn't make any sense to exclude them. There are plenty of opportunities to work with Humber College and York University to do programs in Brampton. It's a case of, if you were looking to do some kind of innovation district in Brampton, they're pretty much all, if you look at places that do it, they're always in industrial areas where there's space. So one of the places that would have clearly made sense would have been around Bramley Go section. Conveniently, in Bramley's letter listing sections, there is no I section. You could literally plan I section and innovation district around Bramley Go. Why? Because it's halfway between Sheridan College and Humber College, and you can easily get to it via York U to Bramley City Center and then down to Bramley Go. It's the exclusion of Humber College and York University make no sense. I went to Sheridan, and a bunch of the students, and I lived near Steeles and McLaughlin because I live with my grandparents helping take care of them. A ton of the students in that area don't go to Sheridan. They go to Humber College because they can very easily take the Steeles bus to Humber College because it's a straight 1-bus route. It's Brampton needs to stop being a victim and take some personal responsibility, including being proactive and talking and trying to bring Humber College and York University to the table. There is plenty of opportunity here. York University is involved in a whole bunch of research on electric buses and that kind of stuff. Brampton conveniently happens to have a major automotive sector. Why aren't we doing something here? If we were at the table, a partnership between Sheridan's engineering program and stuff and York University's research stuff could be very useful. But again, they're not at the table, so we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot. So maybe someone from staff could answer, why are Humber College and York University not included? Why did the staff report come so late? Thank you. Those are my questions.
Okay, thank you. Does staff want to respond now or provide an answer later?
Through the chair, we can provide, I guess, some initial responses, but I think predominantly we can respond to the councillors' questions with the staff report would probably be the easiest. So maybe if that item wants to come forward, we can roll those up and have one set of responses.
Okay, thank you. Do members of committee have any questions for the delegation? I see none. Okay, can I ask someone move a motion to receive the delegation regarding the town and gown?
Happy to receive.
Okay, Councillor Santos has moved. Anyone opposed? I see none. So we will now bring the report 7.7 regarding town and gown. I do see Councillor Santos, you do have questions for staff regarding the report. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, and through you, Mr. Chair. Also, thank you, Sylvia, for the delegation. You did bring up some good points. So, question to staff on this one: Are we completely inflexible with respect to working with and understanding the impact from other post-secondary institutions, either in the future or current?
So through the chair, Bob Bierke, Director of City Planning Design. Absolutely not. I think what we're recognizing is we've had a variety of informal discussions with a range of institutions and been pulling some together and have seen the value of having this kind of an advisory committee be established more at an administrative level with the right involvement. And this is the request for the council participation. The intent is to sort of work with those for whom we've had the most discussion to date and kind of build on that. There's obviously no intent to preclude future additions. The intent is wanting to make a functional group that will probably have a better impact as we kind of build some momentum. But absolutely, there's also all the private colleges and other institutions that certainly could be included at some point or in some adjunct fashion to this kind of a discussion. We want to make sure that we can have a focused discussion with some of the groups that we have had some of the most contact with, those that are actually in Brampton. Like I say, absolutely, it does not preclude having others involved in the future.
Thank you so much, and through you, Mr. Chair, Bob, I think that making sure that we include the private colleges, I know that there's one in particular that's quite large. Councillor Vicente and I toured it in 2019, and I know that they were scheduled to expand, and that's Trios College. They are quite large with plans to expand as well. In addition to that, is there flexibility to also include, given the recent announcement last week and the meeting that we had related to University of Guelph Humber?
Absolutely, councillors, through the chair, it would be probably advisable. I think one of the things that it would be probably in the meeting when we sit down with the other institutions and look at what items we want to talk about. I think that's the other point, to sort of think about what things we want to, but absolutely it would be important to include any of the significant institutions that we're going to want to develop a longer term relationship with. And clearly that's an up and coming one that we want to get off to the right start.
Thank you so much, Bob, and through you, Mr. Chair. I know that in the report it is looking for members of council to be appointed to participate. And I'm very much so interested in this. A lot of things are happening in Councillor Vicente and I in our area with respect to post-secondary institutions and learning, and certainly when it comes to student housing, we're seeing some of the aftermath of that as well. So I would be very interested. I'm not sure if we have to get a nomination, but I'd be very much interested to participate on the Town and Gown Advisory Committee. No further questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Santos. So just members of the committee, regarding expression of interest, I'll do that at the end. We'll go through the questions or the report. I'll note that Councillor Santos did express interest, but at the end of the report, I will solicit any members who want to be considered for this committee, if that's okay with committee, if we do it that process, and I'll proceed with the questions. I have next Councillor Fortini.
Thank you. Okay, you said you're going to do it later. I think, Councillor Bowman is, Sheridan College is on that side of your area. I know there's a lot of stuff coming up in the future, but for now, I think we have Sheridan College. So I think one of you or Councillor Bowman, since Sheridan's there, should be sitting on it. So I'm going to nominate him, one of you. It's up to you two who wants to sit on it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Fortini. Again, just reminder committee, we'll do that at the end, but I thank you, Councillor Fortini. Councillor Palashi, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just on there for nominations. I was going to nominate Councillor Williams and Councillor Santos.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bowman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Question for Bob. In the report, it mentions, I think, 5 different occasions when we're looking at the Town and Gown, supported by the group. The group supported forming an internal advisory committee. The group recommends the committee operate as a pilot program. Who is the group?
So the group, if we're referring to it, is really the informal representatives we've been discussing this formation with from the different institutions, as well as the representatives from the city. So it's really the different parts of the different educational institutions plus the city. Yeah, we could have perhaps clarified that a little bit, but we've been having these informal discussions really to work more focused on specific items, as I think some of you'd probably be quite aware of. And then as a part of that, realized that I think it would be probably important to formalize that through something a bit more structured. And that's this group, which then we felt it would be important to have some direct participation from council on it as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Bob. And so from what I'm hearing, the group did not include any of the 48 independent diploma initiating schools in the city?
It did not, although, it had been, we'd sort of talked about what sort of the best way to get something more formalized moving forward that will actually be able to show some results so that we can actually address some of the key issues. And the feeling was around the tables is to sort of pull the institutions we've been working with together and then kind of grow it from there, and trying to make sure that the meetings are effective and we can actually focus on the sorts of things that we want to have happen through this sort of more formalized meetings.
Okay, and Councillor Medeiros and I were both on the Town and Gown Committee for Sheridan College in the last term of council, and one of the groups that they had on the Town and Gown, if I remember correctly, and Councillor Medeiros, you can correct me if I'm wrong, was the student union. And they had a lot to say about what was going on and about the conditions students had and things like that. Has there been discussions yet about adding the student unions?
Well, there had been some initial discussion in these formative stages, and I think the discussions had really gone to having those groups can get certainly pulled in for certain issues. Some of them won't necessarily involve them, and the idea is trying to keep the core of the group relatively tight. Certainly able to add on an issue-by-issue basis some of those others, and then certainly any of those institutions also have lots of dealings with the students' union. So the intent was to try and simplify the initial membership, but certainly there's opportunity to add to that, either specific issue by issue, or as the group proceeds and kind of gets its momentum, to add others to really flesh that representation out.
Okay, thanks, Bob. And it's just, when it comes to those student union representatives, they're the ones who represent the students who are going to be using our local businesses, visiting the downtown, taking part in the arts and cultural festivals around the city. So they are quite important. So I will leave it at that. Thanks.
Okay, and thank you, Councillor. I'll just sort of also emphasize that outside of these discussions, we have had consultations with the student unions as well, and we find that it's quite valuable to get their direct input, particularly around some of the student housing issues or some of those other things. So, none of this precludes us from also having consultation with any groups that can provide good input.
Okay, thank you very much. So I don't see any further questions. So at this time, I've heard three names, but I do want to confirm those who were mentioned that they're interested. So I do have Councillor Santos who did express it. Councillor Williams, are you interested? Your name was moved by Councillor Palashi.
Yes, I am interested. Thank you.
Okay, and Councillor Fortini moved Councillor Bowman. Councillor Bowman, are you interested?
Yeah, if it can be either one of us, Councillor Medeiros. I think with Sheridan College, we probably have the biggest stake in this of all. So if you have no interest in being on it, sure, I'm happy to sit on it.
Yeah, and so I have Councillor Bowman. Are there any other members of committee that would are interested in joining this committee? Okay, I see none. So
sorry, Mr. Chair, I got on there.
I'm also on.
Sorry. Oh, Councillor Vicente, you would like to be on?
No, I don't know if Councillor Vincente's on, but I'm next.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, Councillor Vicente inadvertently put in this to speak to the moderator. So the speaking order is Councillor Vicente followed by Councillor Palashi.
Okay. Yeah, and I'll pass it over to, but since we see through, I'd see no problem amending it and moving these three names, but I'll listen to Councillor Vicente, Councillor Palashi. Councillor Vicente, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I think you read my mind. I was initially interested in also putting my name forward, but we have three names up, and I was going to suggest that if there are three members of council interested, that we should allow for three. So I will not add my name and support the three names that are there. Thank you.
Great. Great minds think alike. So Councillor Palashi to take us home.
Mr. Chair, you've also read my mind. I'll be supporting the three names. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, great. So I do have a motion. I'll move by Councillor Palashi that the staff report, council appointment for Town and Gown Advisory Committee to the Planning and Development Committee of June 21st be received, that the following members of council be appointed to participate in the Town and Gown Advisory Committees with the option of remaining on the committee of appointing three other representatives. So at this stage, we'll be moving Councillor Santos, Councillor Williams, and Councillor Bowman. Is there anyone opposed? Okay, great. So the motion carries. Our next item, City Clerk, if you can.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the next item is 7.1, a staff presentation regarding the Brampton Plan, natural environment, climate change, and resiliency, and transportation and connectivity.
Great. So I'll hand it over to Andrew McNeil. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Chair Medeiros, and members of Planning Committee. Our intention this evening, we'll go through this fairly quickly. Thank you to those members of council who were able to join us this afternoon. We held an open house on this very same topic from 4 o'clock till 6 p.m. this evening. We had a fairly good discussion and opened it up for public comment. The approach we're taking with these discussion papers, there are 7 total, is to hold a late afternoon open house followed by a presentation to Planning Committee. The reason we're doing this is twofold. Number one, we want to provide as much opportunity for as many people to hear the content and access the content, but also the formal aspect of planning committee is so that we can get this stuff on the record. Part of doing an official plan, what we're referring to as Brampton Plan, we do need to leave some planning breadcrumbs behind us as we go through the process. So at the end of the process, you can see how we got from A to B. So that's part of what we are doing this evening. We're going to fast forward through a bunch of the surveys and intro type information that was shared this afternoon. So if I could ask clerks just to advance to slide 10, and I'll start the presentation from there. And I'm going to be tag teaming this with Greg Bender, who is working, sorry, just back a couple slides, slide 10. Oh, sorry, back. Should be overview of the Brampton Plan project is the first slide. Couple more. So it's a gray slide titled Overview of the Brampton Plan project. Okay, we can start there. There we go. We'll advance one and we'll start there. Thank you so much. Brampton Plan is what we are referring to as the new official plan for the city of Brampton. For those who have been following the process, you're familiar with that name. What an official plan does, what Brampton Plan will do, is it provides clarity around the city's objectives for city building. Many of you were involved in the creation of the 2040 vision back a couple years ago. It was one of the most extensive and inclusive community engagement processes to that point in the city of Brampton's history. What we are trying to do is build upon that great foundation, continue the momentum of engaging the community, but also translate the ideas and aspirations of the community into formal planning policy that will, in the not too distant future, become entrenched in legal language in planning policy as part of Brampton Plan. So we're taking a vision and translating it into planning direction. Critical for everyone to realize, we're not trying to entrench Brampton as it is today. We are trying to be forward-looking and try and take where we envision Brampton being in 30 years from now and creating the framework to deliver that type of community as we move forward. Our goal is to bring this forward to Brampton Council by Q2 of 2022, hopefully for approval by Brampton Council and subsequently by Region of Peel Council. We do need to follow the region. We need to conform with the region's official plan. We are working quite closely with them. Their timeline is hopefully by the fourth quarter of 2021 to bring a new official plan for the region forward. So the timing of this should align quite nicely. But we do have a significant amount of latitude. We are well within the timeline that we are allotted. Following a regional official plan approval, a municipality has 1 year to bring your plan into conformity. So we should be positioned nicely. Next slide. Brampton's current official plan was approved in 2006, and I think we can all understand that the world has changed dramatically since 2006. That official plan no longer fully reflects the priorities or embodies the best practices that we're seeing around the world. So Brampton was due for an update. That's exactly what we are doing. We also need to conform and be consistent with regional and provincial legislation, which is part of the process we are engaged in. Next slide. Five-phase process that really began in January of 2020 following council direction to undertake a comprehensive review of the OP. This is a complete rewrite that we are engaged with. We are not just tinkering with the OP. This is a complete rewrite of Brampton's official plan. Phase one was really understanding all of the great work that had been undertaken for many, many years in the city of Brampton, all the master plans, strategies, etc., that would create the background information to allow us to move through this process quickly. We undertook a gaps analysis just to make sure that we have all the information we need. And as a result of that analysis, we've been able to really expedite the process moving forward. Phase 2 was testing the 2040 vision, doing some growth scenario analysis, etc. And back in December of 2020, you may recall that we brought forward some of those projections. We do predict that by 2051, within the 30-year planning horizon that the province requires us to plan for, Brampton will be a city of 1 million people. That's a lot of intensification, a lot of growth. We remain one of the fastest growing communities in the country. And this plan is about growing in a smart way, directing it where we want growth to go in mixed use nodes, transit corridors, etc. But it's really about being smart, not only from a physical form, but from a financial sustainability perspective. Third phase was testing policy, understanding what we need to conform to, what gaps may currently exist in our OP. And where we are right now are discussion papers that we are bringing forward. Again, a series of 7 of them that we are doing our best to engage with the community on. That will lead to a refinement of directions. We're hoping to have a large public gathering in September, where that will set the stage for updated planning policy, ultimately leading to a new draft official plan. Next slide. 7 themes. We've already brought forward arts and culture, attainable and supportive housing. What we brought forward today to our open house as well as to planning committee are natural environment, climate change and resiliency, as well as transportation and connectivity. These are 2 areas that are front and center for a lot of residents as well as council in the town of Brampton. Absolutely critical to the future of planning Brampton. And it was no surprise that we got some great questions this afternoon in our open house. Next slide. Discussion papers are ideas. They're meant to trigger ideas in folks. We want to test some things, make sure that we're zeroing in on the right direction, and we're looking for feedback. We're looking for the community to tell us, are we headed in the right direction? Have we got it right? Is there anything we're missing that you think we should be thinking about? And then we will pull all of this together in some very concrete directions that will happen over the summer of 2021. Next slide. And with that quick introduction, I'm going to turn it over to Greg, who's going to give you a high-level overview of some of the content that we shared today. And again, we're going to go through this fairly quickly. There are attached to the presentation some fairly lengthy reports on both of these subjects. So for the community that's interested in rolling up their sleeves and digging into the meat of this discussion, there are 2 reports that accompany this presentation on the agenda this evening. Over to you, Greg.
Thanks, Andrew, and good evening, committee. I'm going to walk through the Natural Environment Climate Change Resiliency discussion paper first, if I could have the slide advanced. Thanks. So just for those of you who would like some additional context, natural heritage is something that is featured in every single official plan, but there's also significant provincial policy guidance, regional guidance, and local guidance as it relates to how natural heritage features should be identified and how they should be enhanced over time. But for context, natural heritage features, they're generally wetlands, woodlands, valleylands, lakes, and rivers in the city of Brampton. There's certainly lots of natural heritage features that are coincident with your river system. Natural heritage systems are essentially all those identified with linkages. So natural heritage systems do identify and help conserve biological diversity, ecological function, and sustain an ecosystem with things and services that we all depend on, whether it relates to pollination, clean water, flood damage reduction, among other things. Next slide, please. And as part of this assignment, we need to enhance the protection of the natural heritage system, certainly a significant provincial policy theme. And some of the best practices and themes that we're looking at relate to natural heritage system planning, low impact development, which provides linkages across a number of different themes, actual linkages to corridors to allow for wildlife movement, road ecology. Next slide, please. As well as restoration and enhancement of natural heritage systems, protection zones, so how different areas of influence that could surround natural heritage features to ensure that they are protected over time, bird-friendly design into development proposals, and then mitigating and adapting to climate change. Next slide, please. So in each discussion paper, we look to really identify some policy recommendation and sort of highlights related to those I'm going to walk you through. So certainly looking at having east-west corridors. Many of the rivers obviously go north to south, so we're looking at having east-west corridors and linkages to help connect those to allow for sort of free flow of wildlife and to allow those habitats to grow. Certainly looking at preventing fragmentation of that system as development occurs. There's often impacts on the natural heritage system, so we want to minimize that fragmentation. And again, ensuring that protection zones, buffer requirements for provincially significant wetlands, they're consistent with provincial guidelines to ensure that the city is conforming to that. Next slide, please. Certainly some of the recommendations we're looking at is encouraging the development of invasive species strategy, looking at promoting green infrastructure for managing stormwater. Again, I'll talk a little bit more about that as part of the next discussion, and understanding that natural heritage system is a natural asset under an asset management program versus just an actual feature. Next slide, please. You can skip the polling. This is just an example of the questions we asked today. So I talked a bit about natural heritage systems, and there is direct linkages to climate change and resiliency, and to ensure the city is resilient for the foreseeable future. So there's no surprise to committee that your city unanimously voted to declare a climate emergency. As part of that, to help assist with that, the city also approved the Community Energy and Emissions Reduction Plan in September 2020. To address the crisis, the city must urgently reduce greenhouse gas emissions and prepare for the consequences of a warming planet. Next slide, please. As part of those greenhouse gas emissions, it's important to understand that 45% of those emissions in Canada are under the direct or indirect control of municipal governments. So it's important to understand that municipal governments have that control. And understanding further to that is that land use planning is a very successful opportunity to address some changes in response to climate change. There's a number of linkages that we will be addressing as part of the official plan review, and which is why climate change actually applies across a number of different discussion papers, not just one in particular. Next slide, please. In terms of understanding sort of the overall framework for climate change and resiliency, it goes from anywhere from the Paris Climate Change Agreement, which we're calling global, all the way down to what municipalities can do in terms of an environmental master plan. And there's a number of different levels that must be looked at and considered when the city should be looking at doing anything local to address climate change and mitigate any challenges from that. Next slide, please. In terms of strengths and opportunities, we certainly looked at those and some successful initiatives that are improving the city's environmental performance. And some of those initiatives, which I'm sure you're more than well aware of, relate to updated strategic documents in terms of transportation master plan, environmental master plan, having a Brampton Grown Green Environmental Master Plan refresh, which is relatively recent, the 1 Million Trees program, which I think is a significant undertaking, and anything related to the electric bus program, which we heard a lot more on that from a councillor this afternoon. So certainly a lot that the city is doing to move forward the initiatives of climate change and your response to that. Next slide, please. In terms of key policy areas, key areas that we're looking for policy development relate to mitigation and adaptation. In the current official plan, we're looking at things that are related to sustainable transportation, clean energy, energy efficiency, and anything related to in terms of adaptation, in terms of flood protection and infrastructure upgrades, all to address and to mitigate the impacts from climate change. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, in terms of natural heritage systems, climate change and resiliency is the same. We're looking for policy recommendations, and these will range from lower zero carbon energy systems, so something that we're looking to entrench in policies to help guide the city as it relates to increasing its ability to address energy systems. Looking at having a focus on low carbon, smart, healthy, and efficient buildings, which is something that we'll be looking at as well. And the major shift in terms of automobile dependency, there's lots of discussions about where and how development should happen, but also we need to understand that it has to be coupled with infrastructure upgrades and perhaps additional amenities and transit improvement to really get people out of their vehicle to allow for walking and cycling and other modes of transportation. Next slide, please. In addition to what I just mentioned, we're looking at trying to reduce emissions from home and building sector in the city. This is something that many municipalities are looking at because there is a significant impact from the home and building sector. So something we're looking to address. Trying to adopt active transportation networks and implementation plans to, again, to increase access to active transportation networks. Looking at creating an energy advantages, as well as supporting communities that incorporate those energy and water conservation, again, to provide some, maybe perhaps some incentives as it relates to that. Next slide, please. And again, just an example of the polling question that we had. Next slide, please. So I've talked about natural heritage systems, I've talked about climate change and resiliency, and I mentioned that they're all interconnected in a variety of different ways. And if you can advance the slide, please. This is just one example of, you know, the various neighborhoods in the city, and the fact that they're not necessarily contiguous to one another. There is some distance. So how does one travel from one to another? Certainly there's, you know, an automobile that can be used, but we need to look at enhancing access to various communities through transit and active transportation to allow for those alternative methods of travel. Next slide, please. In terms of policy context, there's a number of different pieces of legislation, provincial policy that we have to look at. Certainly, you know, there's any existing transportation master plans, there's regional transportation plan. There's also obviously the visioning work that was undertaken in preparation for the official plan, among other, you know, big moves and things that that are done at the provincial level. Next slide, please. Some of the overarching issues related to transportation, we've identified three here, and they relate to health and sustainability and equity. Health, obviously, you can improve your health and well-being by being more active. Sustainability relates to, again, some of the other slides that I identified in terms of reducing impacts on the climate change. And equity is just some individuals don't have the ability to afford a vehicle or just choose not to. So you have to have additional means to get around within the city, and having additional active transportation routes can help with that. Next slide, please. As part of the transportation and connectivity discussion paper, we've identified a number of key directions, and one of them is complete streets, which really is just trying to bring access to your existing and new streets to build safely and comfortably accommodate people through various means of transportation, whether that be walking, cycling, transit, and driving. Next slide, please. When you have all those modes of transportation in one, it's important to understand what those risks are as it relates to safety. And Vision Zero is key direction number 2, which is to ensure that the city's roads and road network are built and operated in a way that minimizes risk of injury and death for all road users, not just pedestrians, but everyone who will be using those. Next slide, please. You heard Andrew mention nodes and corridors and directing intensification. With additional density comes additional need for amenities. And the idea of concentrating development and intensification, primarily within nodes and corridors, is a significant focus and opportunity for the city to cluster development, but also allow for enhanced investment for transit, enhanced investment for infrastructure, but also allow for that more active streetscape and active public realm. Slide, please. And the last direction is key direction number 4, the emerging technology. So allow the city to evolve as technology evolves. You know, Brampton leverages emerging technologies, again, to enhance and advance its broader mobility goals. Understanding that there's, you know, the typical way of getting around today might be very different in 20 years, which is what we're going to be looking at as part of the official plan. So certainly something that needs to evolve and be addressed as part of the process. Next slide, please. Again, another example of the polling questions, if you can skip that, please. And I think that concludes my last slide. I think I'll turn it back over to you.
I'll wrap up with the last couple slides, and if you could go to the next slide, please. So we have created a fulsome engagement process. We're engaging with committees of council, numerous focus groups across the city, community members, etc. So we're doing everything we can to be as inclusive and reach out to the broader Brampton community. Obviously, the thing that's missing today is face-to-face interaction. And as soon as it becomes safe to do so, we'll be out there in full force engaging with the community, because that's what we truly love to do, is be out face-to-face with the Brampton community. Next slide. I mentioned earlier we were had an open house on that planning committee on June 7th. Tonight, we had an open house this afternoon and are here before you this evening. Our final round of discussion papers will occur on July 26th. Again, an afternoon session from 4 to 6, followed by a session at Planning Committee where we'll talk about growth management, jobs, economic development, the form of the city that we need to be thinking about moving forward as well. So again, very, very important discussions moving forward. And next slide. Next steps. Next slide. So please, if you'd like to provide some feedback to us, if you have comments for us, you want to learn more about the project, please email us, opreview@brampton.ca, or visit our website, brampton.ca/Brampton Plan. And final slide. Next slide. Again, that's just the process that I walked you through earlier. And last slide. Thank you. And we're happy to take any questions that members of the committee may have.
Thank you very much. I do have two members of committee. Councillor Singh, go ahead.
Thank you, and I did get some time to look at the discussion papers as well. They are quite long, but I did have some questions. I thought there was some perhaps gaps or areas that I felt like that were a little bit overlooked, and maybe I did miss it, so you can clarify. But I thought, for one, when we talk about natural systems, and it also alluded to the 1 million tree project, my concern is around the biodiversity. A complaint I get from residents is they're planting all the same type of trees. Are you going to be looking at sort of biodiversity and not just of the natural systems, but I guess of the, for example, the streets and the type of trees we're planting just on the streets? If they're all just the same trees, you know, one disease and everything's wiped out. So I just wanted your comments on that.
Yes, thanks, Councillor Singh, and through you, through the chair. You're absolutely right. Biodiversity is very important, and we've learned that through things like emerald ash borer and other diseases that can impact cities. It is very important to plant a diversity of trees, not just for wildlife, but also to protect your forest canopy. From an Brampton plan, official plan perspective, we can have high-level policies that speak to the need for biodiversity, but I think what you're really getting at is some of the details that would flow out of an official plan, and that would get into more of the operational issues within departments, so our forestry group, et cetera, and guide how they would conduct their business. But you're absolutely right with the comment. Greg, is there anything that you wanted to add to that?
No, and thanks, Andrew, and through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Singh. I completely agree. I think it's a very good point that should be considered through any implementation of the Brampton plan. And just note that certainly, as Andrew mentioned, there's some high-level policy that can be identified, but the sort of where the rubber hits the road, so to speak, is through that implementation. So through any departmental study or individual report that might identify where certain species should be identified, how they might be planted, and things of that sort.
Yeah, and I do understand the difference between the operation side, but I would like some guiding policies for that, so they can permeate down and touch the operational side. So I think some guiding principles would be welcome.
Yeah, we can absolutely do that.
Yeah, and let me know if I am getting into the operations with my next couple of questions. But when we talk about transportation and roads, one thing I feel like we do overlook sometimes is our trail system and making sure it's well connected and identified. I do have a meeting regarding trails in my area. I feel like in the future with the transportation moving around, people will be walking around a lot more, and you can actually walk around from one point of Brampton to the other. There's actually a robust trail system, but it's not as connected, and growing that trail system in new areas. So is that something that's going to also be considered?
Through the chair, absolutely. A connected system is what is required, and I believe the city's cycling master plan and complete streets talk to that specific issue. So we will absolutely reinforce that. I can tell you personal experience. I'm a cyclist. That when we're back in the office, I ride to Brampton City Hall, and there's nothing more frustrating than being on a trail and then it just ends, and you've got to fend for yourself for a couple more blocks. So.
Yes, exactly, and that's a major issue in my area. Yeah, that's what.
Yeah, so we absolutely agree with that. That will be a principle in the plan, and I can guarantee that that would translate down into more detailed operational policies. And I believe that the cycling master plan does speak to that approach.
Yeah, no, I did see the cycling side, but even just people walk on trails, right? It's not always about
Absolutely.
cycling. So the trails, like I walk every morning on a trail in my area, and it stops so many times just abruptly and doesn't connect, and you have to cross a couple of streets to connect. Second is more, it is a question about operations, but I do want to talk about in the climate change portion particularly, and it is connected to the next discussion paper on transportation. Something I always talk about is when we do road construction, the materials we use. I feel like there's a lot of innovation there ready to happen that would help meet our climate change targets. And additionally, operations, when I look at our fleets, some of the councilors we bring it up, but I feel like we should be moving to electrification, not of just transportation, but also our roads vehicles, our snow vehicles, for example. So are we going to be looking at innovations in our city operations as well, or is that outside the scope of the official plan?
Through you, Chair. Again, we can set some policy direction to hint that that's where the city would like to go, but I believe that the details of what you're asking for do translate into more operational issues. But absolutely valid to set the direction through planning policy.
Yeah, as much as you can include it, I get it. I'm not going to fight that one. I know it's more in the operations, but if there are any guiding principles, I think it would be helpful. And lastly, on page 27 of the transportation connectivity, I just want to, it talks about trucking and trucks and the future of logistics. And I was just one thing that made me nervous is it's only a paragraph talking about that, but logistics is a big industry in Brampton, and how it interplays in our existing streets, and as we get more density, that really needs to be hammered out, because I don't know what that looks like myself. And how do you have pedestrian-friendly roads? You know, we're talking about higher order transit, whether it's LRT, Queen Street BRT, and then we're talking about trucks all using the same road. And I don't think we've matched it out as well as we need to. But in the future, these issues are just going to become more pronounced.
And if I could, through the chair, you're absolutely right, Councillor, saying that we've identified a few hot button issues that we're going to have to tackle through Brampton Plan. That's one of them. We understand the importance of logistics to the city of Brampton. A lot of the economy has grown around that, but we do have to reconcile this with some of the placemaking objectives. And there are some places in Brampton where we probably want to say, it's okay for a truck to go through here, but you can't do it at 80, 90, 100 kilometers an hour. If you want to go through this place, you need to go through on the terms of the community, or perhaps we can direct trucks to other routes to get from A to B, because in this area of the city, we value pedestrian first, etc. So we're going to have to reconcile this through this process, and we understand it's a tough conversation. We're going to have to work with the region as well. Again, that's not going to be an easy one, but it absolutely is on the radar.
Yeah, and you know, there's always a balancing act, because you know, you have CN, you have CP Rail in Brampton. Every day there's hundreds and hundreds of trucks, and if you slow them down, you know, that's a lot of idling. I've seen it when they've had issues on the sites and all the trucks get stuck, and then you're talking about air quality, and you want them in and out as fast as possible as well. So that balancing act it's I don't know what it looks like, but it needs to finally be hammered out, and especially what that looks like in the future. And that's all my questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Singh. Councillor Santos.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to give a big thanks to staff who spent about an hour and a half, 2 hours before this with members of the public presenting the same stuff, and it was a pleasure to be part of it. I do support the questions and comments that Councillor Singh had asked about biodiversity, and in particular with respect to natural heritage. So as we're looking at natural heritage, Councillor Vicente and I, we still get comments from the public about what they refer to as weeds in some of the natural heritage sites. And I think it's great because through this process, there is an education component because there is a bit of a culture shift, not just with respect to transportation, but with respect to how we plant things, what we're planting, and what that means when you have a house next door to it, what that means to your lawn, what that means with respect to storm management ponds that are more naturalized, and what that means when there are more mosquitoes. So those are kind of the day-to-day complaints that we get as we start to transition. If you could speak a little bit more on the planning process side of things, of how we're going to deal with that education component moving forward. And also with respect to the question from Councillor Singh and the connection of the trails, I think that wayfinding, more wayfinding and signage along those trails are super important. And I would even suggest, since we're doing so much work with various maps, etc., perhaps we should start to look at our own app when it comes to wayfinding around Brampton or the region of Peel. Those are just my comments, and just again, thank you very much for this afternoon. It was a pleasure to participate tonight.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Santos. And we couldn't talk about the environment without going to Councillor Willens.
Thank you, and through you, Chair, just a quick comment. Thank you very much, Andrew, for the presentation. It's no doubt that local governments are best suited to oversee most of the actions needed to reduce the emissions and to address climate change. Urban emissions fall into probably 3 of the categories: building, transportation, and waste. So these are there's a lot of rock stars around the world, such as Copenhagen or Amsterdam, that have done that, but there's less talk on how they got there to do it. So I guess us as council and as a municipality, we really have to continue to lobby groups like FCM and AMO to get the federal and provincial governments to update their archaic policy. So just thank you once again. It's nice to see that at least we're on the right track here. So we just got to keep pushing our other levels of government, and we'll get to be that green city of the future. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I see no further questions by members of the committee. I do have a motion moved by Councillor, first of all, Councillor Singh, to receive the presentation and approve the staff report recommendations, that the presentation by Andrew McNeil, Manager, Official Planning Growth Management, to the Planning Development Committee meeting of June 21st regarding Brampton Plan presentation be received, and that the report titled Information Report, Brampton Plan Discussion Papers, Natural Environment, Climate Change, and Resiliency and Transportation and Connectivity Citywide to the Planning Development Committee meeting of June 21st be received. Is there anyone opposed? Okay, there are no objections, so the motion carries. We will now go to item 7.5, I believe.
That's correct.
7.5, yes. And I believe Councillor Singh's the one who held it. Councillor Singh?
Yeah, I just my first question is more around the proximity to the houses, because right across the street you have some actually dense developments. So it always concerns me when we have warehouses being proposed so close to dense residential areas, particularly when we look at things like air quality and environmental factors. So I just wanted staff's opinion on that.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman. Alan Parsons here. Um, First off, just want to respond by saying staff are obviously very sensitive to the proximity of uses such as the one proposed here, industrial uses, relative to the residential uses just on the east side of Dixie Road. The area as a whole, including the subject site and the lands to the north and south, were all planned for industrial uses and some other uses, really with the full really awareness that there are residential uses on the east side of Dixie Road, and there's a residential hub and community that's really right there as well. And so those types of uses were all considered prior through earlier policy. This rezoning application, as proposed, really will be able to satisfy all the necessary separation distance requirements and noise requirements associated with the proposed use through to those residential uses that are close by. We'll be verifying some of those things through a later site plan application, but the rezoning application here dealing with the use really has been reviewed, found to be appropriate in those ways. We also wanted to ensure that the site is designed from an aesthetic standpoint, such that it's sensitive and really complements the residential community that's close by as well. But maybe further to the the potential impacts of industrial operations being here, the concept that we've included with the recommendation reports tonight shows the design of the building, which is designed in a very particular way to have the building itself really located in between what would be a trucking activity area on the property and Dixie Road and the residential uses on the other side of Dixie Road. So the building itself will really act as a barrier for sound and visual activity through to the more sensitive areas. So that will help through the site plan application that will be processing really to facilitate this development. We'll be sure to receive additional details about the noise levels and really how in a way those are being attenuated so that there won't be impacts on the residences as well. And as far as potential more intense uses and uses that could potentially use toxic elements or anything of that greater intensity from the types of elements occurring on the site, if there is any chemicals and such, there's requirements in the zoning bylaw that differentiate between those types of industries and softer industries. And so there's no permissions that are associated with this zone that's proposed tonight in that respect. So yes, Councillor, we have reviewed those items and have found that we can recommend approval of this application here.
Yeah, and that's partly my concern. I would like that to be paid attention to when it comes to the site plan in particular, because it's not just a regular single dwelling unit. There's a lot of townhomes there. There's a lot of density, so we have to be very, very mindful of that. And another concern is with these type of uses also, the amount of land and building, even if we argue it's employment purposes, the jobs normally aren't there, especially because there's been so much automation when it comes to warehousing and all that. So, I do have that concern as well. This is an employment area, and I want to try to maximize the number of jobs. So, I am a little bit concerned about that as well. I guess
okay.
That's a comment. Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Singh. So that was just a comment. Any further questions?
No, I'll keep an eye out during the site plan phase, and I really do hope we try to be mindful of the environmental issues, but secondly, make sure that we maximize the amount of jobs we can, so the community really benefits from something like this.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Singh. Are you okay to move this motion, to move this item?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Singh. So, members of the committee, I will allow you to read this and take it as read. Motion moved by Councillor Singh. Is there anyone opposed? So the motion carries. Thank you. We now go on to I believe
Item
City
12.
Clerk just, sorry?
Item 12, Mr. Chair, councillor question period.
Yep. Members of the committee, are there any questions? I see none. Public question period, City Clerk, are there any questions from members of the public?
Mr. Chair, there are. There's 4 questions. They're effectively the same from Gloria Shawn, Jiwanjot Sandhu, Karambir Singh, and Prashanth Kumar Panda. And they're all in regard to item 7.3 on today's agenda. And that was the item with respect to an application to amend the official plan zoning bylaw, Great Gulf Homes, Scottish Heather Developments, and Brampton G&H Holdings. And the question is, it's 2 questions. I heard Councillor Paleshi talking about expediting of Embleton/Mississauga Community Center. However, residents are not having transparency. The request to expedite was raised in 2017, 2018, and until now, we are still not sure what action has been taken. We had sent emails requesting timelines and budget allocation in December 2020 and didn't hear back from the city. Also, in today's meeting, Community Services team are not available to answer questions raised by Councillor Paleshi, so wondering if we can get an answer during public question period regarding budget allocation for the community center and timelines, and set up virtual town halls in coming weeks with residents showing the action taken and progress done so far with regard to expediting the community center. That's the first question. The second question is, I had requested on behalf of residents in Brampton West, Mississauga Steeles area regarding outdoor play areas for teens and young adults in the neighborhood, so want to know if there are any plans for outdoor play areas such as a basketball court, tennis court, cricket stadium, or soccer, etc.
Okay. Thank you, City Clerk. I do see Councillor Paleshi would like to respond. Go ahead, Councillor Paleshi.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor and or Mr. Chair. I had a good conversation with Marion, the Commissioner of Community Services, and we're going to definitely be looking at the possibility of setting up a virtual town hall as of right now. Hopefully, it's maybe we can soon do it in person, but a virtual town hall, nonetheless, to just to bring all the residents, let them know what we are doing, what we have been doing up until this point. So we're having those discussions, and look forward to having that very soon. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Paleshi, and just commending taking that approach, very open and transparent, and it's a great way to engage with residents so they can get their answers directly. So thank you for showing leadership in that. So I do not see any further questions. We now move on to our last item of business is adjournment. So I have a motion moved by Councillor Fortini to adjourn. Our next meeting is scheduled for July 26th at 7 p.m. And the motion is read as that the Planning Development Committee do now adjourn to meet again July 26th or at the call of the chair. Is anyone opposed?